Hi, welcome to the webinar series. And today we're going to talk about creating leadership legacy, moving from success to significance. What does that mean, right? So let me start a little bit by highlighting a couple of key things that I think is very interesting about this whole journey that we take. All of us, I think, every single human being goes through this journey of trying to attain success, and then at some point in time we try to attain significance. And what does that all mean now, right? So if you really think about it, right, if you really try to understand our human psyche and how we are built and how we are kind of just our human nature, right? We struggle and we fight a lot for what we call psychological needs, right? We want to get the basic needs, right? And today maybe basic needs would include things like having a phone, access to data, knowledge, some form of recreational activities, basically all the needs that allow me to be a human being, to be alive, and to feel as I would a human person, right? Then we go to the next phase, right, where we start to look for safety, right? We want to have a home, we want to have financial security. I think that's going to be very important for many people. Have a nest egg so that regardless if there's a rainy day, I'll be able to overcome whatever comes across, and that's safety, right? Having that safety nest. And usually we kind of dictate that usually in terms of financial security in general, right? And then, right, and this is where if you think about maybe 3-4 generations ago, right? I mean, you think about the folks in the 40s and the 30s, and when we had the World War IIs and the World War Ones and all the Great Depression, right? I mean, essentially people were saying, let's just focus on getting our psychological needs, our physiological needs, sorry, and our safety needs. And then and as the world changed, right, and there was peace, in 1945 with the United Nations, and you started to see things change a little bit, right? Because then people started this whole journey for meaning, right? And what it is, it started first with, I want to have some sense of well-being. I want to be part of something where maybe it's a team. I want to contribute, and we started to see a lot more community, right? Where there was a little bits of communities that started to spring out all over the world, right? You have this community and that community, and you have Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and you have all different communities. But it's about having some sense of belonging, having a family, having being loved, having colleagues who are your friends, right? Not just folks that are working with you, but also friends, right? And then you go one step higher, where it's about esteem, right? Now it's about just psychological needs, not just your physiological needs, right? It's about, how do I feel a sense of validation, a sense of respect, a sense of acknowledgement, that people acknowledge me, the community acknowledge me, my peers acknowledge me, my peers respect me. And when you have that sort of a sort of thing going for you, right? Then you start to say to yourself, right, hey, this is where you come to the final part, where we call it, Abraham Maslow, when he came up with this Maslow hierarchy of needs, right? He basically said, look, at the end of the day, this part of the Maslow's hierarchy is essentially what we call self-actualization. This is where you say, I've got the physiological needs all sorted out. I've got my phone, I've got my laptop, I've got my gym membership, and I've got all these other things, right? I've got my safety nets, I've got my home, I've got some sort of financial nest egg, I have a sense of belonging, I belong to this community, I've got friends and validation, and I've got respect from my peers, I've got all that, right? And then you start to say, I think I want to have a sense of meaning, I want to have a sense of success, sense of significance, right? And usually, right, when we talk about meaning, right, usually we have to go through each of these places, and we have to tick off these boxes and finally come to the final piece. And that's why we call it a journey, right? And each of us takes part in this journey, right? This journey is not something we do in isolation. All of us go through this journey. And many, some people, I mean, if you think about the folks, who lived maybe 100 years ago, right? They didn't get that opportunity to move up to self-actualization. We in the 21st century, we have that opportunity to say, I think I've ticked up all these boxes. I want to go to that to that next box that is up there. And really, that is the dialogue we're going to talk about today. How do we get to a point of finding our meaning in life? How do we find our purpose? How do we find our significance? And so I'm going to tell you a bit of stories, but I'm going to share with you at the end some tools that you can use to start figuring out for your own life, for your own circumstance that you may be in, right? What does that mean, and what should I be thinking as I chart my journey to significance, right? And so let me just talk about a couple of tools and resources that are pretty good. John Maxwell wrote a book, The Journey from Success to Significance, and everyone talks about it, the journey. But of course, the hallmark book is a book by Bob Buford, who wrote it for the 40, 50, 60-year-olds about 30 years ago. Back then, that was what we call he called the book Halftime. But if you read carefully, it says moving from success to significance, and he found that somewhere about 25, 30 years ago, there were many folks in their 40s or 50s that had reached a point of success. I've kind of, and it's essentially going back to that whole hierarchy, right? They've reached a point where, I think I've got this need, and they're looking for more, but they just can't find it. I've got success. I want more success and more success and more success. But more success didn't give them that feeling of self-actualization, that passion, that being purposeful, that finding meaning, right? And so, when Bob Buford wrote this book, he said, look, I think people need to move away from success and into significance. Now, I'll talk a little bit about folks that try to go directly to significance. We and many of us as young people, we say, hey, I want to go right into significance. I don't care about success. But it's a journey, right? Like everything, right? There is a journey that we need to take, right? And if we don't go along that journey, sometimes we miss certain things. And because we miss certain things, we end up not being we don't actually find that real meaning that we are looking for. So I'll walk you through that whole thing, and as we journey through, I'm going to share stories of a number of people, right? And as we journey through them through their stories, hopefully this will help us with our own story. Because at the end of the day, we chart our own story of significance, or we chart our own story of success to significance. So with that, I'm gonna, and again, John Maxwell, when he wrote that book, The Journey from Success to Significance, one of the things he wrote that is success is when I add value to myself. Because sometimes people say, hey, what is success and what is significance? Sounds similar, right? They both start with S, and I can be successful and feel significant. I'm the richest man in the world. Hey, I feel very significant. I feel very good about it, right? But John Maxwell, when after Bob Buford wrote that book, John Maxwell took it one step further, and he said, look, he thinks success is when I add value to myself, and significance is when I add value to others. And I think that's the human journey, right? The human journey is like we need to figure out how to add value to ourselves so that we can then be able to add value to others. And that's the journey that each and every one of us need to partake of, right? So let's maybe very briefly I'll talk about my own journey, right? So when I first started out working, I started out working in the US. It was all early on, my first few years of my career, right? Spending first 9 jobs. I worked in ExxonMobil, then I went to General Electric, and my next few jobs, right, were in General Electric for about nine roles or so, about 14 years in GE. And when I was in GE, one of the most exciting things was the promise that I could one day be CEO of GE, right? And so that hope, right? So to me at that point in time, somewhere up to somewhere in my 7th job, right? My whole thing was really about success, and success, right, was equated to becoming CEO, right, or becoming a senior leader, or becoming a boss, right? And so I work really hard, right? Sometimes even 24 hours, just go nonstop. You get out of work at 2 a.m. and you come back at 6 a.m. and you just work and work and work and work. But it was really about how do I attain success. And somewhere, when I came back to Asia to run the aviation business, when I came back to run the aviation business, I remember one very eventful evening. I was flying. I flew over to China, and that week I actually flown to Japan to meet the folks at Japan Airlines. Then I was in Korea to meet the Asiana folks, which is aviation, which is the airlines in Korea. And then I had gone to Guangzhou to meet China Southern Airlines, which is another airlines based in Guangzhou in China. And I was sitting down with Madam Wei, I remember, the head of engineering for China Southern Airlines, and we were having dinner. And I was trying to convince her to buy, service her engines in my shop. And we were talking, and I was so tired and so fatigued that I remember that I just I fainted, right? I fainted, right? there's a big hot bowl of soup there, but I kind of fainted next to it, and then I fell down on the floor, boom, and flat. Like for I think to her it seemed like eternity, but I think it was like about 3 minutes or so, 2 minutes or 3 minutes. I was just knocked out, right? And she panicked, and she's like, "Ooh," and they managed to get me up, and she's like, "Look, I'll sign the deal," and she signed the deal and shipped me back and said, "Get out of here." And on my flight back, right, I was thinking to myself, wow, why am I working in GE? Why I'm already at this level where I'm running the business, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Is this success really what it's all called out to be? And this is where I had my, I'll talk a little bit about that, right? There's a transition moment where you feel that you've kind of ticked off the success button, and then you start to say, what is my real purpose? And what is my significance? So the next couple of jobs, right, was really about me trying to figure out what was my significance. What's that journey to significance? And so I started saying, maybe I don't want to run businesses with me. Maybe I want to start helping people. And so I took on a role. I kind of worked with our G folks and said, "Oh, give me a role where I can help people." And said, "Okay, why don't you run our learning division?" People, teachers are really important, and teachers are legacy folks. And I'll talk a little bit about teaching in a bit. And so I did that, and I'm like, okay, fine. And then I said, why don't I go into HR? And I did the Asia Pacific HR role. Again, I was already a business leader, so it's kind of taking up some senior, sort of senior roles. And then I went to J&J and said, look, maybe I take a bigger global role, but helping people, in the HR function. And then one thing led to another, and finally, right, I realized, as I did different things, right, as I experimented, as I tried different things, as I got involved in a lot of volunteer work, whether it's through GE's volunteer program, or whether it's my own community thing with the Orang Asli community and so on, I started to figure that, what I think really is my purpose, is this journey that later I called the Leaderonomics journey. And it was, kind of a simple journey where I said, look, I think I want to fix the world. I want to try fixing the world, and I want to try starting in Malaysia, right? I want to say, look, let me start with this country, and let me see how I can take some person and move that person from what they are to a state where they become a leader. And if they become a leader, maybe, right, maybe they will start building new communities, right? They will start building new communities, not of hate or fear, but a different kind of community. And if we can do many, many such communities, maybe, just maybe, we will transform the country. And maybe we can do many countries, So we started with this small mission, right, to say that, or vision, right, to grow people into leaders, to build communities, and to transform the nation. And so that started my personal journey into this space of significance. Now each of us will have our own journey to significance, right? And if you look at it, right, I think one of the most impactful stories that I've ever heard and I read of is the story of Alfred Nobel. Now, not many people know who Alfred Nobel is. But if you read the word Nobel, I think you get a sense of what Nobel is, right? The Nobel Prize, right? But many people don't realize that Alfred Nobel, right, was actually the inventor of dynamite, right? So he invented dynamite, right? And when Alfred Nobel invented dynamite, he became very rich and very successful. So he was a very rich and successful person, kind of financially well off. And if you look back at the chart, right, the Maslow's chart, he's got the physiological needs. He's got the safety net because he became rich from dynamite. He started to get acknowledgement and wow, and he started to hang out with all the rich people. And at that time he was considered the new wealth, and so he started to get recognition and all that, and so and kind of he was going along life, and suddenly, right, his brother died. So here is what happened. His brother passed away, and when his brother died, right, somehow the press, again, this was 150, 200 years ago, right? The press, right, thought that Alfred had passed away. So they wrote an obituary in the newspaper the next day, was an obituary of Alfred Nobel, right? And Alfred hasn't died, right? His brother died, right? But there was some miscommunication, and they didn't have the internet and Google to check facts and fake news and stuff like that. So that was the fake news of the day, that Alfred Nobel died, right? And so people like don't really know who invented the dynamite, right? So anyway, the newspaper did their research and say, oh, so Alfred Nobel the father of weapons of mass destruction is dead, right? And Alfred Nobel became rich and notorious because he created dynamite, and dynamite is used to blast mines, but it's also used for war. It's used for negative stuff, to burn things and blow things and do these things. And Alfred Nobel's here reading the newspaper about his own obituary, right? And so he's like, whoa, I died, and this is what they're saying about me. And this is where he had that moment of significant, right? That's one point in time where you start to say, hey, wait, is this really success? Is this what success really is? I don't think this is what I want. I want something more. I want significance. I want to be significant. I want to leave a positive legacy. I want to do something more with my life. I want to be known for something else. And this is where he had his legacy moment, right? And say, what's my legacy? My legacy is going to be weapons of mass destruction. I don't want that to be my legacy. And that's where he stopped and he said, whoa, this is bad, right? And he had that legacy moment and he said, look, I'm not dead, right? Because someone, you're talking to friends like, dude, look at that. People think that I'm going to be known in history as the guy who destroyed the world, right? Who introduced weapons of mass destruction into the world, right? And so he said, look, I want to change my legacy. Because someone told him, right, hey, you're not dead, dude. You're still alive. That doesn't mean that you can't change this, right? You still got many years to go, right? Change it, right? And he said, you're right. I can change the script of my life, right? My success was dynamite, but my significance is going to be something else. And so he said, look, I'm going to take the money that I make, right? And I'm going to channel it, right, to what we call the Nobel Peace Prize, right? Or the Nobel Prize, like he started with science and so on and so forth, right? The Nobel Prize, right? Peace came later, I think, right? And so he today, right, when people talk about the Nobel, right, and when they talk about Alfred Nobel, he's not known as the father of dynamite, right? He's known as the Nobel Prize guy, right? The guy who brought the Nobel Prize, the guy who donated all his money, his entire fortune, to Nobel laureates, right? So it's essentially, if you start to look at his life, I think there's some great lessons that we can learn from his life, right? And one of the lessons, right, I think that we can learn from his life is that all of us, right, will go through a point of success first. We need to get to success, and we need to exorcise the demons of success, and then we get to a point where we realize that, hey, wait, I think success is not so great as it's called out to be. I really want to look at significance, and how does that play out? What does that mean, and how do I get there, right? And that's really what we're going to talk about for the next, next couple of bits. Is really to talk a little bit about how do we get to success, right? And we see that with many other characters, right? I mean, Bill Gates, right? If you think about his success, right? His success was Microsoft, right? He built Microsoft and he became the world's richest guy, right? Not anymore, because he's giving away his wealth, and Jeff Bezos is now the world's richest guy, right? But he reached that point. I'm the world's richest guy. So what, right? I've got everything under the sun. I can get everything under the sun. So what, right? And he realized that success is not as great as it's called out to be, right? But he had to find his own moment of success. He had to realize that, and this is where it's very tough, right? Because many times we say, hey, why is this guy so interested, so ambitious, so aggressive, and why is this girl like this? Why are they chasing money? What's wrong with them, right? But we all have to go through that hierarchy, right? I walk through that Maslow hierarchy. We all have to go through that hierarchy, in some way or form. And at some point in time, as we go through this hierarchy, we reach a point where we say, hey, I have been successful, and I've got well-being. I've got my physiological needs set up. I've got this done. I've got that done. But I'm still yearning for something more, and that something more is not coming. And Bill Gates says, as we look into the next century, leaders will be those who empower others. And he can talk like this because he has a lot of billions in the back of his pocket, right? And to him, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right, is his chance of legacy. Just like Alfred Nobel was like, look, Microsoft is one piece of the pie, but I think my biggest significant moment is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, because we're going to solve problems. We're going to solve world problems. We're going to eradicate malaria. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to vaccine people. We're going to, and he went on this mission, right? He works even harder with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, They work even harder, but they have found that purpose. They found that reason for living, right? And so, if you think about Nelson Mandela, it's the same thing. He fought, and here's where it's very important. Nelson Mandela was a very successful lawyer, right? But to him, what was more important was to unite South Africa. And even though, right, and when you find your significant moment, you will find lots of obstacles. There will be massive obstacles. So don't get wrong, because many times we say, hey, once you're successful, then you find your significance, and the significance will be easy because it'll be easier, maybe, because now you have some clout, you have some respectability, your peers recognize you. I mean, if you walk through the hierarchy, right, you've gone through that process. Today you've got peers that recognize you, you've got acknowledgement of the community, you've got all these things sorted out. But now I want to have some form of significance, self-actualization. I want to have meaning in my life. But to achieve that is not going to be easy. There's going to be obstacles, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be all kinds of stuff. Nelson Mandela was in prison for 27 years, right? But that didn't stop him, because it was about enabling a significant thing to happen, right? And enabling that to happen. And so that's why it was very important. And we look at others, right? I mean, there are many others, right? I've given you an example of Alfred Nobel, Bill Gates, many others. But there are tons of leaders, and you always see this. And sometimes you say, this leader, right? He's still chasing money. He's still chasing money. They want more money and more money, more money. And then they're probably folks that, when they reach, they've reached this pyramid, and they think, right, significance mean being the richest person in the world. So maybe if I'm number 3, let me be number 2, let me be number 1. But when they reach number 1, then they realize maybe it's not all great. Because how much of money do you need to feel, a sense of security? How much of money do you need to feel to have, kind of your personal needs taken care of, your physiological needs, your food, your shelter, your water, all these things? I mean, it reaches a point where so much is so much. You don't need so much, right? And so how do you begin this journey, right? And this is really what I'm going to talk about over the next, like, say, 15 or 20 minutes. How do we begin this journey of purpose? How do we start to figure out where our journey of success to significance, right? How do we get to success, and how do we get to significance? Now, I want to start by saying that, when we talk about success, right, there are lots of webinars and books on success, right? So success, right, and success have to be defined by yourself, right? So success can be money, success can be impact, success can be, some form of acknowledgement, respect, some form of praise, from your boss. And, maybe I bring up my family well, that's success for me. So we define success in our own words, right? And in our own terms, right? So depending on whatever your definition of success, you will have some sort of definition of success. And to you, usually success means something tangible. Usually it's something, even if it's intangible, it's like respect and acknowledgement. It's usually, when we look at the hierarchy of needs, right, it's usually one of the lower pieces, right? Not one of the definitely not the top piece, right? So usually that's what, when we define, that's what usually success is, right? And so, when I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about significance rather than success, right? So we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about significance, and feel free, at any point in time, to stop me and ask any questions if if you have any questions or any thoughts or any other things that you need me to zoom in on and discuss. So I want to share a little bit today on this journey of success to significance. How do you begin this journey to significance, right? So when one of the first things I think we want to talk about is, one of the things we need to do, and we need to do this really well, is we need to figure out how to get success out of the way. And what does that mean, right? What does it mean, get success out of the way, right? It's one of those things, right? If you are not successful, right, you need to be successful first. So you need to have clarity of what the success, and success is a demon, right? Because it wants you to get something, and it pushes you to get something. So you need to get to that success point. So I'm gonna put as a caveat, right? So some of you, maybe you're starting out in your career, you got to start to say, what's my first vision? And my first vision is the vision of success. Don't talk about significance. Why is success more important initially? It's because we cannot imagine what significance is. And I'll show you in a little bit when we go into the journey of significance, because it's about gifting, it's about hobbies, it's about finding that sense where it's the sweet spot, where everything's aligned. There's an alignment of 4 or 5 different things that come together, right? So significance is a journey that we get to, right? Because we need to understand there's a process of getting to significance. So the first part is, what is the journey of success, right? What does that success looks like, right? Define what success is, get it, or try to get as close to it as possible. Because once you get success, you will start asking questions. And many times we hear this, in the 70s or 80s, they say the kind of midlife crisis. They talk about it as midlife crisis, right? When especially men, right? They get successful in their careers, they drive they buy the Ferraris, they try and find this and have their affairs. I mean, all the stuff that happens, and then they realize, I still don't feel fulfilled, right? Because they've got success, but they don't know how to get to the next phase of significance. So if you have not got to success, first get success out of the way. Figure it out. Be successful, and then realize that success is not as great as it's advertised to be, right? And then exorcise your demons of success, abolish them from your system. And because if you don't do that, right, when you come up that journey, you start thinking, yeah, if only I had this. And look at him, he's so successful, he's the money. I've been dedicating my life to this NGO, and I'm doing all this good, but look at how bad they're treating me. And you get internal grief, and you get internal turmoil and all, partly because you need to have journeyed through that success and say, look, I've done it, I'm dusted. And you've seen many people, right, who have great careers, and they say stop halfway. It's like, look, I'm done, and I'm just not bothered, and I move on, and they're happy, right? There is no regret to say, because I've done it, right? And one thing, I for me, I remember, it's like, when I was in GN with Johnson & Johnson, all these different companies, I would travel business class everywhere, right? Almost every week I would plane to Japan, to India, to US, to Europe, and so on and so on. Every day, after I set up Leaderonomics and said, look, this is my personal journey, right? I never flew, and I didn't want to fly. And people say, we got a trip here to this country. I'm like, you go. We're done, right? You've exorcised that demon. You've got success out of the way, right? Okay, so that's the starting point of how to get, you need to get success out of the way. That's the first thing that you need to do. Now, the second thing is you need to have some form of clarity of what the the reason why. Okay, so I'm going back to that. The reason why we want to get the, I talked about it. You need to make sure you have all your needs met. You need to have your safety needs met. You need to have your belonging and love and all these other needs met, right? And you need to have your esteem needs met. Then and this is success, right? So this is success. Once you have that, let's then talk about significance. Okay, so imagine, right, if you're not financially secure and you say, I'm going to drive this, right? So yes, it's still possible if you're not financially secure to do this, but you have to have strong faith, right? So you believe in God, you believe in that the universe and God will take care of you. That's great, but that means your success needs are taken care of. So why you say, I'm not financially secure, but I know God will take care of me. That's great. It means that you've reached a point where you have success, because you know that anytime, because there's a famous guy who ran an orphanage called George Mueller, right? And he had such great faith in God that he said, I've reached success, because I know I don't have to worry about money, because anytime, once he set up an orphanage with hundreds and hundreds of kids, but he had absolutely no money. But he said, don't worry, and every day somehow somebody will come and donate money to him. So it's actually, he had reached a point of success because he had this true belief that God will take care of everything, and that's fine. Then he said, okay, now I'm good. My meaning is to help kids, is to set up this orphanage, and so on and so forth, right? So we need to make sure this is taken care of. Then we can start working on self-actualization, or what we call our meaning in life, the feeling of being significant, the feeling of being purposeful, the ability to drive legacy, right? The ability to ensure that the work that we do, the handiwork that we do, lasts a lifetime, is there forever, right? And so that's important, right? To take care of this part. So let's say we've already taken care of this part, and we say, okay, now I've got a plan, and I've done this, and now I've kind of my esteem, my belonging, my love, my safety, my physiological needs all taken care of, right? Now I want to start taking care of my significance. I want to move from success to significance. How do I do that, right? And so I'm gonna share a couple of tools and a couple of processes, and then we can go from there, right? So so the starting point, right, if once you've done the success, is to find your clear vision. Okay, what's that mean, right? And a couple of weeks ago I talked about purposeful businesses, right? And one of the things I think that's very important is that many times, right, when we want to do significant work, right, we sometimes focus on the project, or we sometimes focus on the actions, or we sometimes focus on the program, or we sometimes say, this is a strategy, right? But those are what we call the hows and the whats, right? What we want to start before we decide. Because sometimes it's like, okay, I will now go and volunteer with the NGO, right? That's a project, or that's maybe a program. The NGO may have some specific projects in there. So I'll take these 3 projects in the NGO. Or maybe it's tactic, from now on, I'm gonna be, every time I see a beggar, I'm gonna give, then I feel significant. But that's the tactic, right? So don't start with tactics, don't start with projects, don't start with programs, don't start with strategy. I got, this is my strategy on how I'm going to be significant. Start with why. Start with the vision. What is it that I want to do? What is the problem I want to solve? What is the issue that will make a difference? What is the one thing that I can do and only I can do that is going to make a huge difference to this world, or to this community that I serve, or to my family, or to whatever, right? So when you define the why, right, why you do what you do, right, you start to then have a lot more clarity on what, how, and the what's, and all the other things to do. Now there's a model called the why, how, what, which I shared in more detail in our purpose-driven webinar. So if you want, you can check that webinar, and I go into detail on this. But I want to just talk a little bit about why. Why is about significance and meaning, right? Why is about knowing my personal why, my reason for existing, my reason that God put me on earth, or whatever you believe, right? What is my significance, and what is the reason I'm here to do at this point in time in history, and what must I be doing it, right? So then once you figure out this, then we can figure out how to do it and what to do, right? But the key is to understand this, right? Now, many times, right, and I spoke about this, many times we start with what should I do? What should I do? Or I should help this orphanage. I should do this. We always start with what should I do? Then we say, how should I do it? Maybe I start a fundraising campaign to raise money for them. And why are you doing this? Because I want to help. Because I don't know. I'm trying to find my significance. So this what, how, why. This is what we call outside in more. The outside in way, right, is what we call for experimentation. When you want to experiment and say, I'm not sure what my purpose is, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do tactics. Go back to that earlier place, right, where I talked a little bit about tactics, right? You come back here. If you cannot figure out your why, you will end up doing this, right? Maybe I do a program, maybe I do a project, maybe I try some actions. I do this one action and see whether that makes me fulfilled, and I go around doing things like that. But it still doesn't give you a vision. It still doesn't let you stand for something. You need to stand for something. You need to be owning something, and saying, this is what my life calling is about. This is what my significance is about. This is what my mission in this earth is for, right? And this piece takes time, right? For me, it took many years, right? So I left school, I had this journey to success, and then I realized it's not. And then I said, let's try this, let's try that, and let's try this, and we try. And this is why I share this, because we will try tactics after tactics, projects after projects, programs after programs. We will try all these things, and then we say, let's do big picture. Let's organize, create an organization, and see how we can strategically move things, right? But when you find and some people call this thing ikigai, right? The sweet spot that is ultimately your reason for existing, right? When you find that, right, then you start to have clarity on how to make all these things come about. It becomes a lot more clearer, and it's very much more purposeful. So when we talk about how, why, how, what, many of us talk about what, why, how. Sorry, what, how, what, what, how, why, right? But what we need to do is we need to do it the other way around, right? Why? Because that's then you can start to prescribe your significance. Because when you say, why am I doing this? I want to change this part. I want to solve this problem. I want to, there's injustice that's out there, and I'm sick of this injustice, and I'm going to stop it. That's why I want to get involved in politics, or that's why I want to do this, or that's why and then how are you going to do this? Okay, I'm going to take on cases. I'm going to fight. Whenever there's injustice, I'm going to be a pro bono this and that and so on and so on. But and what you're going to be, you seem to be like a pro bono lawyer, but that's how people view you. But why you're doing this. Deep down that, and over time, right, because you stand for something, over time what your actions are, right, or how you, and what ultimately your actions or your behaviors are, will ultimately be because of your why, your central purpose, and so on and so forth, right? So that's important for you to understand why, and start with why, and then we figure out the hows, and then we figure out the what's, right? Again, it's easy to say, right? So I'm gonna share a couple of tools. Like, be about 10 minutes or so. I'm gonna just share a couple of tools, and we'll go from there. So when we think about our vision, right, or a dream, right, many times we like to do what we call the what, because what is easy, how is easy. Like, how do we do this? Let's put a plan together. Let's have this. But if you look at it, right, most of the time, right, people don't move. You don't move the needle. You don't inspire people by having a plan. Imagine if Martin Luther King, had this big speech. I have a dream, right? If he went there and said, I have a plan, guys, and many CEOs do this, right? I have a plan. Here's our plan. Here's what we're gonna do. Blah 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 blah. Where many of them get it wrong is that what they need is this big, hairy, audacious dream. How do you find your big, audacious, hairy dream, right? So that's going to be the challenge, right? But remember, it's about a dream, not a plan. Many times we like to have plans, right? So I want to move to significance, but let me have a plan on how to get to significance, right? Start with the dream first. Don't start with the plan, right? Success can start. I'm very clear. This is what success looks like. I want to be CEO. So you have that dream, right? I want to be CEO. I want to be, head of something in this division, or I want to, make sure my 3 kids come out really right. And so you have that successful dream, right? So then there's clarity. Then you say, okay, what's the plan? That's fine, right? But now it's the same with significance. You need to have that dream. What is the significance that you are going to drive? And once you have that dream, then you start to say, okay, how do I build a plan? But the plan comes later, right? Goes back to that the things I showed you, right? This one comes first, then you can build all the rest. Then the final piece will be the tactics, right? So remember, we need to kind of phase it. So that's the first part, right? So number one, exercise your demon of success. Be successful first, right? So define success and try and achieve whatever you define as success. Make sure that happens, right? So once you have defined success and enabled success to happen, then you start to work on your journey to significance. Do not, right? So then when it comes to the journey of significance, right, you start your journey by very clearly finding your vision. And don't start with tactics or projects or programs. Start with what's the thing that I want to do? What's the one thing? What's the legacy that I want to create? And then start figuring out the how and the what. Okay. So with that kind of pushed aside, right? So remember, plans come after the dream. Do not have plans before the dream, right? Okay. So then the other piece that we must remember is it says big, hairy, audacious dream, right? It's not small, tiny, achievable dream, right? So when we have dreams, right, many times, we have 3 categories of dreams, right? We have what we call realistic dreams, right? And we say, okay, this is very realistic. I can achieve it very comfortably. We have what we call unrealistic dreams, which is, wow, what we really mean is this. It's not that it's unrealistic. It's very hard to achieve, right? This would be a lot of effort, and I can't see the roadmap of how to get there. But I've seen people who've done that. So obviously it's not impossible. Somebody has done it. But I don't know how to do that, and seem to me unrealistic. But it's doable. And then of course the last part is impossible. Now, don't have impossible dreams. It's not gonna happen. I am gonna one day be the guy who invents time travel, and because of that, I'm going to go back in history and kill Adolf Hitler before he was born and change the course of history and da da da. And that's an impossible dream at this point in time. It's probably impossible for the next, I don't know how long. But anyway, you never know. Jules Verne's many of the dreams that he had has come true. So he's wrote a book also on time travel. But it seems to be at this point in time rather impossible. Now, an unrealistic dream will be, let me create a movement like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and I'm gonna get a million people together, and we're gonna, change, this part of society, or we're gonna get rid of injustice, right? Now that seems far fetched. How am I gonna get? I don't know, a million people. How am I gonna get a million people? But have people done that before? Yes, somebody has done that. Many people have done that, not just some, right? So it's unrealistic, but it's possible, right? And that's what big, hairy, audacious dreams are. It seems unrealistic, but it's possible. People have done that before. And why you dream this big, hairy, audacious goal? So if you think of Bill Gates, right, and the Bill and Melinda Foundation, right, it's about eradicating diseases in the world, right? Wow, I mean, how can you do that? I mean, that's impossible, right? But he's saying, look, let's start with the five. Let's start with malaria. Let's start with this. Let's start with that. And they go about doing that, right? And they come up with grants, and they come up with. So if you think about how Bill Gates started, it's like, okay, let me have this dream of eradicating diseases, right? And then how are we going to do this? Okay, we'll put aside $20 billion to give away as grants so that people will find ways. That's our strategy. We'll do another one where we will do immunization, and we create vaccine. And then how are we going to do? We set up many programs, and these programs will drive the 20 billion. These programs will do what kind of projects and what kind of tactics and what must I do, and then it all comes together, right? And so that is very important, right? It's go big, right? Be as we talked about, right? The realistic dream is like comfortable. I will definitely be able to come, but will that really create a legacy? Will that really create significance? I don't know. Maybe it will. So that's fine. But if it's realistic, great. You will probably achieve it. But if it's unrealistic, right? Wow, that's where it's going to be very interesting. But it's impossible. This is where many times we dream this impossible dream, and it's just impossible, right? And then you give hope, and then you give up after a while, because it's not going to be possible to even get close to it, right? So be mindful, right? As you have big, hairy, audacious goal, it's really the unrealistic category you're talking about, right? Be unrealistic. That means it's hard work, but somebody has done it. It's possible, right? So that's that piece, right? Then, right? So now that you've figured out, you want to have that dream. How do you find that dream? How do you build that dream? How do you create that dream, right? And here's a little exercise that I recommend that you try for yourself, right? So you take a piece of paper, and you can screenshot this, or you can download the handouts. I'll give you the handout so you can print this page, and just ask yourself, right? What are things? What is it that I love? What is it that I love to do? What are some things that I love to do? Okay, I like to do, and just the activities, right? I love to do this. Okay, that's great. That's your hobby, right? What is it that I'm good at? And I'm going to talk a little bit about these two in a bit. What is it that I'm good at, right? I'm good at this. I'm good at that, and then you start to say, what does the world really need? And actually, these are the three things you need to do, right? Because later, some of you will say, I want I've reached success, but I still need some form of continued financial security and continued well-being. And so this category won't be applicable to the Bill Gates of the world, because I don't need to be paid, right? I mean, I've got a friend who runs a foundation, who made lots, and even though he's the CEO of the foundation, or he's the leader of the foundation, he tells the foundation, don't pay me. But he said, we have to pay you. Okay, pay me $1 a year so that I'm an employee, but I don't want money, because I already got stuff that I'm paid for. So some people will be lucky enough to say, okay, I don't need to be paid. But some of you will say, I need to be paid, and then you need to find that sweet spot, right? But this is what people call the ikigai, right? The what do I love? What I'm good at? What the world needs, right? And this goes back to, as we, and this, to me, these three things are very key. Number one, number two, and number three. Four, maybe, depends on your situation, and whether you need continually, I talked about the Maslow hierarchy, right? Whether you need continuously financial support and security and empowerment and all these other areas, right? If you don't, then maybe it's not relevant to you. But if it is, then it is. But if you start to say, what I love, what am I good at, what does the world need, right? And this is a question, right? That, I'll just maybe spend 30 seconds on this. If you start to look at the world today, you start to do an analysis, right? And what the world needs is maybe more justice, maybe more love, maybe more care, maybe less poverty, maybe more technology. I don't know. So as you start to see the world in your lens, through your experience, through your vocation, through the things that you do, right, you start to see the world in lenses that nobody else sees them, because you are you and you are unique, right? So as you see the world in those lenses, you start to say, well, I think this is what the world needs. Now then you say, okay, and you start with that, right? You start with this piece, right? This is what does the world need, right? And when you start with what the world needs, then you start to go into, what do I love, right? And what am I good at, right? And I'm going to go deeper in this too. Give me a second. I'll go deeper and I'll share you another tool that you can do to understand what your gift is and what your hobby is, right? Um, because I'll just share this very simple tool, but start with this tool first, because you want to start to ask the questions: what does the world need? Really, what does the world need, right? Now I'm going to go deeper in gifting and hobbying in a bit, and once you do that, you can put that in, right? And as you put that in, right, you start to then put it together, and you will start to find a sweet spot that potentially could be your legacy, could be your significance, right? The significance that you can bring to this world, right? And again, remember, this is a process, right? You do not do this and put a chart together and then boom, I'm 19 years old and I figured out what my significance is. You got to have that. Remember, I told you, must have the journey to success, right? You start the journey to success first. Once you finish whatever the success journey is, then you start to say, how do I do what the world needs, not what I need? Remember, success is about what I need, right? Adding value to myself. Significance about adding value to others, right? And that's why it says, what does the world need? Right? When you look at the success journey, it's not about what the world needs. It's about what I need. I need financial security. I need, physiological, sort of some, my physiological needs met. I need, my psychological needs met. I need, well-being. I need, to be recognized. I need peer recognition. I need people to know and the contribution that I'm making. I need all that stuff, right? But that's what I need, right? Significance is not about what I need. Significance is what the world needs, right? It's what others needs, right? So very clear, like success is about adding value to myself. Significance is about adding value to others, right? So once we get that equation right, and remember, it's very hard, it's always a saying, right? We want to help others when we can't help ourselves, right? So you get the success shop in order first, get your stuff in order first, and then let's look at the world and how we can help the world, right? So how do we? So let me go a little bit deeper, right? The meaning of life is to find your gift, right? The purpose of life is to give it away, right? And here's where I'm gonna. It's a short little exercise that I found was very useful for myself personally. And I learned it from a guy called Lionel who shared this with me. And I thought it was very powerful, to understand, because I sometimes get confused about gift and hobby, right? And what we want to understand is, there's a difference, and why there's a difference is really about two things, right? So take this a little chart. Just take a piece of paper. If you want to do it now, you can, or you can do it right after this. Just look at all the activities that you are currently that you like to do, right? And so there are two lines. There's an effort line and there's an outcome line, right? So this is the impact. So is the impact low or is the impact high? Is the effort high or is the effort low? Meaning how much of effort do you put into to get the outcome that you want, right? So if you put a lot of effort, right, that means you're in this side of the equation. If you put a little bit of effort, you're in this side of the equation, right? If you put a lot of your outcome is fantastic, amazing, that means you're on this side of the equation. If your outcome is low, you tend to be in this side, meaning you do this stuff, but somehow it doesn't get a lot of outcome. Now, well, what we found is that if you think about when you have low outcome and sort of low effort, when usually this happens when there's a trend. It's a trend. I must learn how to use TikTok. I must I think the activity I love to do is use a fidget spinner, right? And that's what we call a trend. Then after a while you kind of give up, right? But if it's like wow, I really it's like a fad. I need to keep going on this because this is something in the 80s or the 90s is a fad. You kind of put a lot more effort, but you still yield very little output, right? Because no matter how you try, you're just not going to be very good at it, right? Now here's where it's very interesting. For if you put a lot of output, you get a lot of output, but your level is very high. That's a hobby. And you notice this with your hobby, right? You'll notice that, when you try something, and I know I've got a couple of hobbies. I'll be working really hard at my hobby. I'll be practicing, I'll be trying, I'll be doing. And over time I get good impact, I get high impact. But that's hobby, right? It's actually hard work. It's a lot of effort. Now, where gift is different, right? And this is where, when you have a gift, right, no one can take that away from you. It's something very unique to yourself. It's something, that only you and only you alone will be able to have it. And a gift is something as simple as this, right? I just thought to myself. So, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to somebody, and I don't know what I was talking. Right, I was just and then, a few weeks later, the person's like, "Hey, thank you. What you told me was really, it's changed my life." And I'm like, "Huh? What did I tell you?" Um, I'm like, "I have no idea." And he's like, "Yeah, I said I had this problem, and I was sharing with you, and then you gave me these solutions." And, "Oh, really? I did? Oh, okay." And I'm thinking like, "Oh, I actually had very little effort, because it was like." I naturally just came to me, to provide certain advice and counsel and so on. And somehow the impact was very high. Now, that is gifts, right? Gifts is when you have, you just can do this with very little effort, but the impact tends to be very high. Now, why this is important, right? So go back to this, right? Is when we know what our hobbies are, when we know what I'm good at, because hobby is really what I love to do, even though it takes a lot of effort, right? What I'm good at is like I can do this naturally, right? And then you mirror it what the world needs, right? You start to get to a point closer to, okay, where does these three things intersect? What I want to do, what I love, what I'm good at, my gift, right? Sometimes we ignore our gift because we're so good at it, we just ignore it. It's one of those things I can do, but I really don't like it, right? But it's important because your gifting is going to help you to understand your dream, right? To be able to get to that point, right? And then what the world needs, right? Then you're able to find the right meaning. And this little activity, just take activity and say, maybe some activities fall here, some activities fall here, some here, and then some activities fall here. Then you say, hey, these are gifts, right? These are things that I naturally have, right? And then you start to say, okay, let me focus on these two domains and start to say, I want to get high impact, right? Because it's about legacy. It's about, making sure that something that's long term, right? How do I take these two things and then mirror it what I think the world needs, and how do I solve some of the problems of the world, right? Then you find your success moving to significance moment, your significance piece, right? And then you get to this point, right? Okay, so I want to leave, it's a again, I talk too much, I think, but there's a famous professor, and he was worked in GE for a while, Noel Tichy. So, I had couple years ago, he was in Bangkok, and we met up in KL for a dinner, and we were talking and talking. The two of us was just talking, and although he had a flight, he was like it's exciting, let's talk. And there are three things I learned from him. So he wrote a book called Leadership Engine. And Noel Tichy, kind of was teaching me a couple of things, and I want to leave you with these three things, because I think if you cannot figure out what your significance moment is, right? If you cannot figure this out, right, what that thing is, the one thing that you can do, right, if you know what you're good at and what you love, right, is to do teaching, right? Because one of the things we find with leaders, right, is that leaders, they leave their significance, they leave their legacy. The legacy of leadership is not the work that they did, no, but it's what they taught, right? Is leaders actually great teachers, right? And many times the things that the leaders accomplish, like I think about Jack Welch, right? Who I worked for, I spent 7 years in GE, the GE that Jack, was leading from 94 to 2001. Jack was running GE, and I was working there. And I think about how he keeps teaching, right? And a lot of things that he accomplished is because he taught, and he was teaching us to be leaders, not to be followers, right? So I think, if I were to leave you with some lessons, right, and that you can take home right away, right, is really about how do you figure out how to be a teacher, right? And that's the best way to give, right? Even if you are still on your journey of success, I'm still figuring out my success journey. How does it matter? I'm figuring out my success journey, but as I go in my success journey, part of it is I start to build my significance journey, and part of my success journey is to teach, right? And teaching builds that journey to significance, right? Leaders who leave a legacy make teaching a personal priority, right? So you think about the leaders who coach, the leaders who use every opportunity to teach and learn, right? So they learn stuff, but then they also teach it out. So you read stuff, but you want to teach it. You want to You want to give them. And I think the last part is that, as we go through life, right, especially as we go through the success journey, and many of us are still on the journey of success, right, trying to figure out what our journey of success is. Always have a teachable point of view. What does it mean? It means you have a clarity of that success vision, that success, the values and the stuff that will get you there. And then you articulate those lessons to others. And in the process, you create a success legacy. I think Bill Gates did that really well, even Microsoft, right? At the end of the day, to be able to create an organization, to walk up, but the organization can still run, right? And then be able to create another significance organization, right? And so I end with this. It's really a journey from success to significance, right? I repeat, you must be successful first, right? You need to figure out you need to exercise your success demons before you move to the significance journey. Significance is about understanding who you are, right? That's very important. It's about a dream, right? You start with the dream, but the dream is about who you are, right? What your hobbies are, what your gift is, what the world is, and then understanding who the world is, and then bringing these two together to figure out what can I do to make a difference in this world. And if we can do this, right, we can end life, right, and be glad that we are not only successful, but we have lived a life of significance. And I think that ultimately is the true calling that all of us want. And all of us want to live at the end of the day as we go, right? As we depart this earth, right? We want to say, I lived a life of significance and am recognized for it, because on our tombstone, just like Alfred Nobel, right? Alfred Nobel is not known as the father of dynamite. You can Google it. People still know he invented the dynamite, but he's not known for that, right? People know Alfred Nobel as the Nobel Prize patron, right? As the guy, the foundation that set up the Nobel Prizes that rewards creativity, science, and innovation, and ultimately peace, right? So with that, thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them right now. If there's no questions, I'm going to pass the time over to Andrea, if she's around, our program manager, to take us through the next phase of this webinar. Andrea?
All right. Thank you so much, Roshan. I think this has been an interesting webinar. I hope that everyone here has gained something and taken some of the lessons back as well. Thank you once again, everybody.